right. Well, a new report from the Senate U.S. from the U.S. House of Representatives Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic shows that Dr. Anthony Fauci and his colleagues heavily influenced a paper on the origins of COVID in order to steer the national conversation away from a possible lab leak. Now, in terms of censorship, this was a very successful project. We were not supposed to say that COVID leaked from a lab. It was called racist and conspiracy theory. When we were told to follow the science, it's interesting because now we have proof that the doctors were, in fact, making up the science, especially as it came to the origin of the COVID pandemic. This is the third time we've seen information about this very paper and Fauci's fingerprints all over it. I was going to say footprints. Fingerprints is probably more accurate, but who knows? And it keeps just getting more and more incriminating for Fauci and friends. In March, the committee released its first report, and what they showed us, and we reported here, was that Dr. Fauci and his colleagues commissioned and influenced the results of this study that showed that COVID could not have come from a lab. Here was their conclusion. Our analysis clearly show that COVID is not a laboratory construct or a purposely manipulated virus. Okay, this paper was off-quoted as basically the final word on COVID was not a lab leak. We also saw that WHO doctors and also both Dr. Fauci and Dr. Francis Collins had been given the chance to see drafts of the paper. We knew that. We also knew that they influenced this paper and that another doctor, one of their buddies, Jeremy Farrar, who is now chief scientist at the World Health Organization, not only was integral in the development of this paper, but proposed these edits to the paper's conclusions. In an email, he said, hey, love your paper, so great. Can I please micromanage and give you an edit? Instead of saying it's unlikely that SARS came from a lab, can you please say it's improbable? So he's not one of the study's authors. He's just reading it and basically changing their conclusion or writing their conclusion. That is really unethical in the world of academic papers, but he felt comfortable to do that. In May, another report was leaked showing just how the Pentagon thought that this paper, also this Nature journal that we're talking about, which was used as the final word, Pentagon doctors had said this is not good science. Here was a leaked paper from two doctors at the Pentagon, Commander Jean-Paul Christian, a Navy doctor, and Dr. Robert Cutlip, a research scientist at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and both concluded that the no lab leak paper was far from conclusive and that the government should not make decisions based on this paper because it just wasn't very good. Well, now we know just how far and wide that paper was circulated in order to control the no lab leak conversation. Here's from the report today. It says, since this proximal origin was published, it's been accessed 5.84 million times. That makes it the third most attention of any paper of similar age across all journals, and the second most attention of any paper in a similar age in Nature Medicine. And it's received the fifth most attention of any paper ever tracked, ever. This is one of the single most impactful and influential scientific papers in history, and it expressed conclusions that were not based on sound science, but instead assumptions. So why? Why was this paper such a banger? It was a box office hit, you would call it. And it was based on junk science and politics, as we're going to show you. Who sent it around so much? Who elevated this content? We know the media did because they were able to use it to shut down conversations, social media as well. Why did this become such a banger paper? Now, the report says something that I hadn't heard before, namely that Dr. Fauci had warned Dr. Andreessen, one of the paper's studies, that if you're going to write this paper now, if you conclude that COVID came from a lab, we're going to have to contact law enforcement. He expands on this later, but this is interesting. Why is he saying this now? If he thinks that even there is some kind of possibility that law enforcement needs to be involved, do you think he should wait for an academic paper which he's influencing? That doesn't seem very ethical. Now, here is the email where he says that if this is, lab leak theory goes through, then we're going to have to call the authorities. And he says in the USA, it'd be the FBI, and in the UK, it'd be MI5. So he's saying, look, this is going to really be bad for us. We're going to have to call the police if this is what you find. So run along, do the paper, and let's hope you don't get there, is what I'm saying. Because if law enforcement needs to know about this, you don't wait until but do your homework first. That doesn't seem right to me. Does it seem right to you?
Yes, the house is on fire, but I'm not going to call the fire department until it hits the roof. Once it gets close to the roof, then we'll call the fire department.
Right. Yeah. I'm curious what he thinks that the Justice Department will do about this. But I guess, there are people there he wants to protect from having to be involved with the Justice Department. The same author, Dr. Andreessen, she found research initially in her conversation with her co-authors of this study showing that gain of function had been happening in China. And I'm choosing not to show this to you on the screen, but the other author then responded to her, F word, this is bad. So they have already, you can tell, an agenda that they don't want, that one conclusion is bad, one conclusion is good, and let's steer ourselves to the one that we want. They went on to author this paper asserting the very opposite. In a few months, even though we know they have some data showing that there was gain of function done in China. Dr. Andreessen even wrote at one point that the point of the paper was to disprove the leak. So again, she's not following the science, but making it up. She wrote in February 8th, 2020, our main work over the past couple of weeks has been focused on trying to disprove any type of lab leak theory. So she's not looking into the lab leak theory. She's specifically going in to debunk it. She says, but we're at a crossroads with the scientific evidence. It's not very conclusive. So she's not happy with being able to doctor up this report. This communication is also new. The two papers' authors saying, yeah, but, we're going to have to do this because can you imagine the politics? At one, she says, I'm going to say the S word, just so you know, given the shit show that would happen if anyone seriously accused the Chinese of accidental release, my feeling is we should say, given there is no evidence of a specifically engineered virus, we cannot possibly distinguish between natural evolution and escape. So we are content with ascribing it to natural processes. And she falls, it's not her that said that, it was Andrew Rem, but another of the paper's author. And she says, yeah, totally agree. I hate when politics is injected into science, but it's impossible not to. No, that's wrong. It's not impossible not to inject politics into science. Those two things can be mutually exclusive. And so that's a smoking gun of an email, wouldn't you say? You wouldn't like that from a peer-reviewed study that you're then using to make basis of, censorship, policy, all of that stuff. It just goes on and on with these kind of, conclusions about how Dr. Fauci knew his name was used to pitch the study to the journal, how him and his friends were influencing the conclusions and how they were going towards one conclusion and ignoring all other research that would indicate a lab leak, an actual lab leak.
Not only that, you got the lab leak, but also they were putting magazine articles out to discredit other scientists that were saying ways to deal with the pandemic. Just any narrative that went against what they wanted, regardless of what area it came from, the lab leak, the protocol for getting through it, it had to be one way, and that was the only way. And everything else that was outside of that one way, they tried everything they could to discredit it.
Yeah, that's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And so then when you consider the reach of this paper and how it was used to influence policy and how we were told that, oh no, we are the science, we're doing really good science, you need to follow the science, it does not garner any kind of confidence in anything else that Fauci and his team of Bethesda boys, as they referred to them, were doing. One of the reasons that maybe is posited that they wanted to draw attention away from this lab leak theory was because the U.S. was participating in gain of function research in China, which was supposed to have stopped during the Obama administration, but was still greenlit under Dr. Fauci. So that's maybe why they were doing it. We can come up with other reasons about why they were doing it. What we know now is that they did it. And so it brings up questions about what else were they lying to us about? What other science were they making up? What other scientific studies were they ignoring so that they could get to one conclusion over another? Again, it doesn't inspire confidence at all. It's not a scientific paper. If you write, it's fiction. If you just choose what you want to include in order to get to the science, the conclusion that you want. That should have been, there should have, given that there were Pentagon doctors who already were poking holes at this should have happened at the peer review stage. And why it didn't, I don't know. And I think it's just worth reminding that this paper was the basis for censoring social media and calling people crazy for even hypothesizing the lab leak, such as this Senator Tom Cotton. They said he was fringe for repeating this COVID origins story. We also had Tucker Carlson. They said he was debunked about this lab leak theory. He wasn't. New York Times COVID reporter deletes a tweet. They said it was racist, the lab leak theory. So, I mean, it created a lot of frenzy on a really terrible scientific paper when we were told, no, we're the science, follow the science, trust us with the science. That trust was misused. And I feel like this is further proof of that. So let us know what you think in the comments section below. Well, and yeah, go ahead, David.
I want to know, this is Philip. I want to know what crime, like that's the thing that what's weird to me is when they're basically threatening them to call law enforcement. Like, but I really want to know, like, for what, like what the proposed crime is. Like, is this like referencing like compromat? Like, do they have blackmail like stuff on them, or is there like, what law would they be breaking in doing scientific research?
No, I don't think that he's saying we'll call them on you. I think he means we'll call them about the fact that there may have been like foreign actors involved in the release of a virus. I don't know exactly what they would.
More like we would have to call the FBI or somebody more than the law enforcement, unless they consider that law enforcement. But yeah, I think it was more that, okay, if this is true, we're going to have to get a lot more people involved, and it's going to make it a lot stickier, and this is going to be a big ordeal, and just kind of like making it seem.
Yeah, but like I guess it's the word that they use. It's law enforcement, not like the State Department. It's not like he specifically says law enforcement. Like, what would law enforcement have to do with it? Like, I could see if we'd have to contact the State Department. If it was a foreign actor that they figured that it could cause an international incident, you wouldn't get law enforcement involved in that. That would be the State Department.
The State Department or the president. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like, to me, it's like, I guess maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but like, to me, it sounds like it was a threat. Like, they're basically, because you call law enforcement to arrest people. You don't call law enforcement to protect the country against international embarrassment.
Right. And who is he writing to here? He's writing to
Dr. Anderson.
No, in this email, he's saying Jeremy. So he's talking to Jeremy Farrar.
Oh, gotcha.
And he says, I just got off the phone with Dr. Anderson. But he had also told her that, Dr. Anderson, if we find out that this is a lab leak, we're going to have to call the authorities. And then he says to Jeremy Farrar, we'll have to report it to appropriate authorities. Again, this is, if you think that there's any concern about this, you need to bring it to authorities anyway, not until like after we see the paper. Because you're influencing the paper. You obviously have no confidence that the paper's going anywhere, right? So he knows that he's going to lead the conclusion of the paper. So the paper is not going to prove bubkiss. And so, yeah, that would mean that he's saying this is going to get sticky. We're going to have to bring in law enforcement. So let's just continue to go down this path. I guess that's maybe the way I read it. Not that like any one of them would be in trouble with law enforcement, but I don't know.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I feel too.
Yeah, I guess.
But I remember us covering a story as well where there were several doctors that initially had said that all roads were leading to the lab leak theory, but then those doctors changed their opinion, and then their grants got funded. Their research got funded with huge grants. We covered that on the show.
Yeah, we had a Senate testimony about that. You're right. What were you going to say, Philip?
Well, I'm just still hung up on the words used of law enforcement, like, and how that I just can't I can't let that go, because it just that to me is just absolutely a threat, because it's not it's just the way it's worded, like law enforcement.
Yeah,
like I can't imagine what law enforcement would do if not to arrest somebody. That's because that's what they do.
And you would think then, because she's not, Dr. Andreessen is not going to be arrested. She's just taken an assignment. You would think, unless she was sort of connected with this gain of function thing, that it wasn't a threat to her. It was just a threat to somebody. But you would think someone in the room would be like, well, if it's that serious, we need to run it up the chain of commands right now. We need to tell, I don't know. Yeah. And him saying like MI5 in the UK would also need to be notified.
Well,
why them?
I wonder if that's,
why the UK?
If it's basically a way of saying, I'm going to have to get law enforcement involved, and anybody that's in the know that's in that thread is like, oh, that's going to lead back to me. Oh, that's going to lead back to me. And then that'll lead back to you, because we have this, that you sent this email that they're not talking about. It's just like a veiled, hey, remember, you are connected to this, just like Alex is, just like I am. And if we get law enforcement, they're going to be going through our stuff, and maybe I that's how I see it. Like it's just going to be a lot of red tape for us. I don't see it as like somebody's going to get arrested right then, but.
Or is it all of us, because we've been ignoring the Obama administration's directive on gain of function? So then we're all in trouble. So like it's the code of La Casa Nostra or whatever. How is it? La Casa Nostra. How do you say it?
La Castra Nostra.
Yes. What is it? The Godfather, right? I don't know. Anyway.
Yes.
Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have tried that one.
Like that.
Okay.
It's all good.
But you know what I mean.
Now my brain's like, wait a minute.
All right. Somebody's going to know. Somebody's going to know in our chat. Okay. Yeah. So this is, again, it's a big smoking gun. Media doesn't give two craps about it at all. They're fine with what was done to all of us during the COVID pandemic. But I care very much, because this is indication of very disingenuous science. And so what else? What else was behind the decisions of Fauci and friends, the Bethesda boys? So let us know what you think. And let us know what you think that FBI bit is. Like, what's that about? Yeah. Okay. Why would the head of the NIH need to get law enforcement involved if the paper goes the way they don't want to go? It's very strange, very strange.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.